All right, so today we're diving into a heavy one.
Yeah, definitely a sensitive topic.
Columbine. A day that, unfortunately, still really gets to people. April 20th, 1999. And, we had a listener write in and ask us to take a deep dive.
Mm-hmm.
They want to go beyond just, the headlines and really unpack all the different facets of this event.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's important to move past those sort of those initial reactions and narratives that tend to surround these kinds of events.
Right. Especially in the early days, there was so much focus on trying to find a simple answer, Video games were a huge scapegoat. And then there was this whole thing with the trench coat mafia, which looking back feels like this very much like a product of the times, right?
Yeah, and I think there is that very human element of trying to find order in chaos, right? So those narratives were really appealing at the time, easy to grasp, They fed into those existing anxieties about youth culture, violent media, offered those seemingly straightforward answers.
Right.
But the truth, as we often find, is far more complicated. And to really get to the bottom of it, I think we have to turn to some really unsettling source material, like the writings and videos left behind by the shooters.
Yeah, it's dark, but if we're being honest, those journals, those videos, they offer this disturbing window into their thinking, right?
Exactly. And, in one of the shooter's journals, he talks about this dream of starting a revolution, of wanting to be admired for his actions. However, twisted that admiration might be.
Wow.
That lust for infamy, that desire to leave a mark on the world, that speaks to something much deeper than just playing too many video games, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. And I think it's a good reminder that we can't reduce these kind of tragedies to just, one thing. But going back, to Columbine being a turning point, it wasn't the first school shooting, right?
Right.
But it felt different.
It was. And, one of the key differences was the media landscape at the time.
True.
This was the dawn of the 24/7 news cycle.
Constantly, yeah.
Columbine was everywhere globally, and the coverage was so intensely focused on the perpetrators, their lives, their motives, and it created, I think, almost a blueprint, for lack of a better term, for future attackers.
And that's where that whole trench coat mafia thing becomes even more disturbing.
Yeah.
Because it was this completely inaccurate portrayal fueled by early media reports, but it stuck. It took root in the public imagination and, unfortunately, in the minds of some really troubled individuals.
Yeah, and it speaks to that power of narrative, even when it's wrong, because it can shape perceptions and, sadly, in some cases, even inspire copycat attacks. Take, for instance, the 2002 attack in Germany.
Right.
The young man who carried it out explicitly cited Columbine as inspiration. He even tried to mimic elements of the attack. These copycat cases force us to confront a very difficult question. To what extent does media coverage, even if unintentional, contribute to the notoriety and, in a perverse way, the success of these horrible acts?
It's a question without easy answers, that's for sure. But, even amidst all of this darkness, I think it's important to remember that there were also stories of incredible courage of people like Dave Sanders, the teacher who lost his life protecting his students.
Absolutely. And his actions, they remind us that even in the face of unimaginable horror, human compassion can still shine through.
It's a powerful message. And, it's not just about the heroism. It's about the fact that Columbine did, in some ways, force some positive change. There was a much bigger national conversation about mental health, especially among young people, right?
Yeah, definitely. It really put a spotlight on the issue.
Schools started implementing new safety measures, and zero-tolerance policies became pretty common. Can you talk a little bit more about those, just for listeners who might not be familiar with how they work?
Sure. So zero-tolerance policies were designed to deter violence and create, a safer learning environment. And they did that by mandating really strict consequences for certain infractions. So, for example, bringing a weapon to school, even something like a pocket knife, would result in, automatic suspension or expulsion.
Oh, wow.
No questions asked.
Right.
And while they were well-intentioned, the effectiveness of these policies, it's something that's still, hotly debated today.
I can imagine.
Because critics argue that they can be counterproductive, right?
Mm-hmm.
Pushing students who might be struggling further away from seeking help and not really addressing those underlying issues that might be contributing to these behaviors in the first place.
Right. It's kind of like, trying to put a Band-Aid on a much larger problem.
Exactly. And that's what makes Columbine's legacy so complex. It compels us to ask these really difficult questions about about mental health, about media responsibility, about, honestly, the very nature of evil. It's a lot to unpack.
It really is.
So I want to leave you with this thought. Would things be different if Columbine happened today, in our age of social media where information, and let's be honest, often misinformation, spreads like wildfire? How would that change things?
Oh, wow. That's a really chilling thought, and it definitely underscores the need for these kinds of conversations, So if this deep dive has resonated with you and you feel compelled to, learn more or even get involved, please remember there are organizations out there doing amazing work to prevent these kind of tragedies and to support those affected by them. Seek them out, stay informed, and let's work towards creating a safer world.